because you're literally operating against your beliefs. You have to kind of take action to change what you think about yourself. So you have to kind of contradict your own thinking, which is hard. It's a difficult thing.
What's up, people? My name is Katie Friesen, and you're listening to Humans of the World podcast. This podcast gives you insights into human behavior. It's walking a mile in someone else's shoes, understanding why people act the way that they do. Make sure to give us a follow on Instagram. That's at Humans of the World podcast. If you don't have Instagram, check out the website, www.humansoftheworld.co. There you can join our community group chat on Telegram. You can talk with different people from around the world, different cultures. There'll be free giveaways, guest access, all cool and exclusive stuff to the Telegram group chat. I would love to meet with you guys. I would love to chat with you. You can find it on Instagram or on the website. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being great. And I hope you enjoy this next conversation. If you're comfortable with it, just paint a picture of kind of maybe like your life as a kid, just so that maybe people have an idea if you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects. Like we lived in like a really, okay, so let's just start where I lived. I lived, and there was like eventually four people once my stepdad comes into the picture. I lived in like what is the equivalent of a studio apartment. It had to be like less than 600 square feet, like way less than 600 square feet. And there was like four people living in there. And like I slept in my crib literally till like my childhood crib until my legs literally poked out the front, like, like literally. And like, just like really poor. The floor was completely undone. The kitchen and the living room. Sorry, there wasn't a living room, first off. Like the hallway to get into the house, like that was it. Like the bathroom was on the right, one door to the right. And then like the kitchen area is really more like a kitchenette. Like maybe it was altogether like 6 feet wide, maybe 6 by 6. And like it was so, like, to paint you a picture, it was so tight that there was the kitchen table, and like you either had to like pull out a chair to sit, or you had to put the chair away to stand in the kitchen. Yeah. And then the bedroom, it was like the bed was up against the wall and there was just enough to like walk in by one side, and then the other side was like my crib. Like my mother and sister used to sleep in the big bed. I used to sleep in my childhood crib. My stepdad eventually used to sleep on like a piece of foam in the hallway. Like that's how poor we were. There's like rats in the ceiling that you could hear. Like they sounded like cats, to be honest. Like they were huge. Yeah. Our neighbors were kind of zany. I mean, we met them too. Like they were just people who like were older, or like very poor people, like who were like kind of living on Medicaid or whatever. Like they were just disabled or whatnot. And yeah, you know what's really striking to me too, like looking back at it, it's crazy how many more fights you have in like low income households versus like in affluent neighborhoods. That has always like stayed with me. Yeah.
And question, these fights are mostly caused by money or what, like financial stresses?
At the root at it, yes, but it manifests in a lot of different ways. Like to the untrained eye, like I feel like they might say, oh, and these people are just like super conflictive. Not really. Like these people are just like struggling in every aspect of their life. So it becomes like anything becomes an enormous like hurdle. And there's also fear, and there's fear, shame, like all those emotions, like a nice cocktail of them. Like you would hear the neighbors downstairs and across, because it was kind of like this little like there's a word in Spanish like un solar. That's essentially what we lived in. Like and a solar is like basically like it's almost like a little courtyard where like the sun comes through, but like there's buildings or whatever like around.
Okay, yeah, I think I know. It's kind of covered by buildings, but there's a little middle spot.
Yeah, and like that happened to be grassy, but like basically on the other side, it was, if you were to look at it from a real estate investor standpoint, this was a multifamily plot.
Okay.
But yeah, there was 2 apartments up top, from what I remember, one apartment down, and then there was a bigger apartment across the way. Yeah, and that big apartment, man, the family that lived there, wow, like they'd have it out, like, you know, like you would hear it big time.
Quick question for you. Now that you're older and like reflect on some of these experiences, like just this one in particular, like what piece of advice would you give to, like, let's say the people who are constantly feeling stressed? Like what would be the advice, let's say, you'd give to your families or the other people, provided they would like accept it, you know? If that makes sense.
Yeah, that is a heavy question. It's just like, I think it's such, you need a way out ultimately. It needs, you know, financially or whatever, or you need some distance from the situation to like get out of that. Like, you know, I think like I love this, like hip hop has really like covered the subject a lot, understandably. And like Kendrick Lamar, I think has a line that like chef's kiss. Something about like his perception being vandalized in a sense. Well, in this particular song, he's like attributing it to another person, but I think he also talks about like the cycle of the environment that he's in, like causes become effects and effects become causes,
Right.
stuff like that, right?
Right.
And it's kind of like when you're stuck in that. So actually, I'll say it through the context of the art, which I think is like, again, chef's kiss. So this is a very different context from, I think, what most listeners will be like, you know, but in the album, he's recounting the story of his life where he's in like a gang fight, right? And you know, they're doing what they always do. They go around, they're riding, they're like locked and loaded, and they're about to like basically run up or drive up on like a group of people and just like shoot them. And it's like, you know, in the song, if there's an ad lib portion where it's like the music stops and then you literally hear like they get off and it's like pop 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 pop, and then one of them is like got him, and it's like yeah woo. But then what ends up happening is one of his best friends gets shot, and he goes to the hospital but he doesn't make it, and that made him realize that really like was sobering to him, because it's like, this is real, this has like real consequences, this isn't a game, right? Versus to the outside, it's like, of course it's not a game, you're playing with guns, blah blah blah, blah. But it's like when you're in that environment, that's a very extreme example, when you're in that environment, you don't have the perspective to really see like what you're doing, what's going on, what this means. And for him, it was like a huge realization that his emotions, his perceptions and things like that were leading to behavior that created these events. And on a smaller scale, that's kind of what happens with like all like poverty and stuff like that. Like you're stressed, or you're afraid, so you don't take the risks or make the moves that you need to like get out of the situation, or you don't invest the time to learn because you're like, oh, I'm so poor, I'm so time like deprived that like I can't afford to like go to school or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, when you're dealing with issues or struggling with problems, you don't really understand them until you've like overcome them, kind of thing, and then you can kind of do the reflection on it, I guess, to some degree. That'd be fair.
Advice is honestly like, I know this is just like, find a way to get out, honestly. Like,
and how would you know, like what?
Education is a good way, but it's like, school's not your thing, which I understand that school is not some people's thing. Like, I guess I was very fortunate. Well, in some sense, I was very fortunate that like people would just hand me A's, from my perspective, you know? Like I would just like show up, they'd ask me some questions, they'd be like, oh, these are easy questions. And then just, you know, and that led to me not valuing school down the line, which then led to me being like, why the fuck am I doing this? But anyway, again, also because I didn't have that perspective of what school meant, and like that it was really like this status thing for like career building. That was like completely lost on me, because nobody in my school had like, I mean, first off, we were first generation immigrants, but second off, like nobody had gone to, you know, nobody had gone to like an American college and like done career building and like understood what all that meant. So I was like, I thought school was to get an actual education, which, you know, arguably it's not, but whatever, like, yeah, anyway. So when I saw that I wasn't learning in school, I was like, what is this bullshit? But anyway, if school's not your thing, which I understand if it's not, learn a trade, like legit. Go and learn a trade. You're gonna have to work like extra hard because you're doing it without resources. You have to like turn some of like the anger and like the frustration that you have into fuel to like, you know, make it work for you to just push through and like do something to get out. Or like if you have like family, which typically you don't in these situations, but if you did have family, like go live with them, go to a different environment, like change your environment, find a way to make some money, ideally legally, you know, like yeah.
Sorry, question for you. I know also you're very into kind of like controlling the mind and Zen and Buddhism. Sorry, just correct me wherever I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Question for you: do you think it's possible, like, let's say that someone was given the tools of the mind, right? Do you think that someone would be? It's possible even just to change your mind, right? Change the perspective, and then like you can go out and do things, or do you think that it's incredibly hard to do that unless you like kind of get your basic needs covered? Should we say?
It's a hard thing to sell people on when they're hungry. And like it's a very hard thing to sell people on when they're angry or whatever. I was very fortunate because I had like a series of interventions where some very, very good, I guess you can call them social workers or counselors, sort of in a way through their actions taught me that I can take control of my mind and not be like completely like stuck in these situations. Like I had people intervene at several points in my life, which kind of gave me that perspective. And I feel like probably like helped me not end up like on a radically different path. So yeah, very fortunate through that. But yeah, it's a hard sell. Like honestly, this is kind of like a fucked up thing to say, but it's just the truth. Like, I feel like somebody would be much more receptive to that if like they were already like imprisoned, like they already like had hit rock bottom or whatever, and now in prison they're like had their foods taken care of, they're institutionalized. Then at that point, if you want to teach them Zen, you want to teach them how to control their emotions and stuff like that, it's like a different conversation, and it is successful. Like there's accounts of like that happening, like many accounts actually in this in several books that I've read. Like there are people who like there are practitioners in the field who go out and that's what they do, that's the work that they do.
But there has to be like that basic level. I guess if we're looking at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs or whatever, like you can't really, you got to get that base level covered at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think even within Zen itself, it acknowledges that there's like a stage of like just pure like wanting and need survival. And like, yeah, that's like kind of like the lowest level.
Yeah.
In fact, like their whole idea of reincarnation or whatever, like you can reincarnate as like a hungry ghost, and essentially like all you are is like needs, which I feel like is a really good metaphor for like, because there are people who are hungry ghosts, not to debase them as individuals, but that they're a product of their circumstances, like, you know. Yeah.
Now that you mentioned that, and we'll hop back into your story, but I do kind of want to ask this question first. What's your opinion on nature versus nurture, but like how much do you assign to, I guess, personal responsibility, and then how much do you assign to like as a product of your environment? Like I know they're not completely like competing, but sometimes they are kind of competing theory of thoughts.
I think it kind of boils down to something that's very simple. Like your perspective, your individuality is formed from your experiences. Like who are you separate from your experiences? Like if I put you in a vacuum, what would you be?
Right. Nothing. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's weird. Yeah.
Okay. Like, I don't know, right? Like literally, just as a thought experiment. So I think that particular debate sometimes, I mean, I understand why people, and there obviously you cannot get ahead, I think, until you have some level of self-actualization. But yeah, typically the people who are saying like, hey, you should just like, they come from a they're higher up on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So I've never even had to consider like all the stuff that like can lie below where they happen to like start on the board, you know.
Right. I guess maybe that language doesn't really appropriate. So I guess so this is where my mind goes to, and then I'd be curious to know your thoughts because you have a lot more authority on this topic. But so if it is you're a product of your circumstances, and I agree, right? We all are essentially influenced by the experiences that we've had in our lives, and that shapes us and all that kind of stuff. So then I guess the only question is, right? So if you are a product of your circumstances, right? It kind of comes down to the external and internal locus of control, right? So then is it just luck, right? Like, is it just absolute straight luck that you meet someone and someone kind of helps you, you know, see a different way to live or whatever it is, right? It helps you kind of get out of maybe the tough circumstances you're in, right? Because then I guess in my mind, it just comes down to luck, right? And I guess from my standpoint, it's like, I don't want to believe that's only luck, but I mean, maybe that's just the reality of it, right?
Well,
I mean, get lucky.
I want to clarify, and like, I mean, few things are 100% one, like white. There's like very few things that are white or black, right? Like, yes, you have like potentially natural characteristics, like just things that you tend to and stuff like that, like that may or may not be adaptive in certain situations, like, you know. But I mean, even your personal characteristics, like, or what the way your method of operating can be appropriate in some circumstances and inappropriate in others. So like the context that you exist in never ceases to be a factor. Like, yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah.
No, it's fair. Sometimes unfair.
Yeah. So is it 100% luck? I mean, no. But in some sense, if you really zoom out, like even your personal characteristics, like your drive, your particular, like, you know, to some degree, yes. Like, I mean, can you change your mind? Absolutely, yes. Also, but you know, the receptiveness to change your mind in the first place, like, yeah. I mean, yeah.
No,
so I don't know if you get what I mean, but
no, I understand. Right. And I think that, yeah, it's just always kind of a question that I kind of have or whatever, and like I haven't had the same experiences, right, as you or as other people. So
yeah, like I think if you in those environments, you'll find that some people like naturally have some better coping mechanisms or whatever, or you know, just like people have a variety of characteristics. Again, some of them are adaptive and some are not in some circumstances. Some people are like very wise and they're able to like kind of keep their head cool or whatever. And like, you know, maybe those people do better or worse, but you know, some people are very ambitious and like that ambition ultimately leads them to try more things, which then leads to more learning, whatever. I mean, I guess for me personally, I always wanted to know what life was like outside of like my lived experience. So that drove me to like explore. And also it's like, again, a little bit of it, I guess, is nature. Like, I think, you know, ADHD types such as myself, we tend to like, you know, I don't want to generalize for everybody, but I mean, for me, it was certainly the case. We like to try a lot of things and like we get bored easily and we want to like see what the trickety trick is and like, how do I like come at this from a different, you know? Yeah. And eventually that led to like discovering some interesting stuff, I guess. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So then taking it back to, you had mentioned that you had some social workers / counselors that kind of, you had some influential moments in your life. Do you want to kind of elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a key one that I will remember is in 4th grade, I had like an angry outburst. And you know, I feel like it was just such a small thing, but it was just kind of like, you never know what's going to set you off when you're like seething with anger, essentially. And it just so happened that there were cops at the school that day. And I don't know, you know, I'm not going to like try to like like blame anybody. I mean, it's definitely, you know, it was because I was feeling a certain way and then I reacted a certain way that led to the situation. Absolutely take like ownership of that. But yeah, I just remember like the cops like called me over or something like that. And like they just got like testy with me. And I'm like a 9. So like put this in perspective, right? And they take me into like the principal's office and they're like, oh, you're really not doing yourself any favors, son. And I don't know, it's kind of like pissed me off even more because it's like, who the fuck are you, right? Like, fuck you. You don't know me, right? And yeah, I mean, what did they do? They like arrested me. They put me in the back of their car and they took me to a like psychiatric unit where I basically spent like, I don't know how many weeks, but I spent like several weeks on essentially like a retreat, you know, which I think ultimately was good because it also let me like experience some consequences without them being like severe. And it kind of like made me think like, you know, should I really have to change something? Because like if I continue to like operate this way, it's not going to be good. Yeah. And I don't remember exactly the individual coaching, but I know that in there they also did some work. Again, man, by the way, shout out to like all the people who work in these places, like so gentle and caring and loving. Like literally wonderful, wonderful times. I don't remember actually like needing or wanting anything like for a second while I was there. In fact, the people that were there, I remember they would make me hot chocolate because that's what I used to drink sometimes before I went to bed to make me sleep. And they would make it for me and like give it to me. And I was like, fantastic. Yeah. So, and I also got to meet other people from different walks of life that also ended up in like these situations. I also got to see some like examples of like people who were really like far in, if you know what I mean, like really, really angry. Like I actually had this room where they put you in where essentially like they lock you up essentially because you're like potentially dangerous to other people. And they literally like communicate, like you're basically in solitary essentially. Like they open up a little grate and it's like, you know, here's your food. Like, and it's like a metal reinforced door. I remember just thinking like, I'm not gonna do that. Yeah.
And this is for like younger kids or like what age?
Yeah, all the kids were around my age. I think the cutoff point was maybe like 13, 14 or something. Like if you were a teenager, you'd get moved. Yeah, these were young kids. Yeah, like if you were a preteen or maybe just starting in your teenage years, then like yeah. And yeah, I remember that that I just like changed my perspective on things for sure. But I mean, yeah, that anger just kind of like got internalized, you know.
So how okay, a couple follow-up questions. First one, how did it change your perspective on things?
Well, actually first it was the first time I was ever away from home too. It's just slightly interesting phenomena as well.
Right.
It's the first time I ever got outside of my context. And I think that gave me the space to really reason about like my life in a certain way.
Right.
Yeah, which is again like why I would advocate everybody, if you have a way out, like get some space from your situation. But anyway, yeah, so that was one thing. And then it sort of made me think about the consequences stuff and like where my life was headed or whatever, potentially. You know, I'm 9, but still like these things, like I was thinking about these things.
So it kind of just gave you like the space to think to some degree or whatever, just gave you the
yeah. It also made me think like, you know, it made me think about like the way that we section people in society to a degree, to be honest with you. Yeah, like, and I remember thinking like looking at the worst examples, you know, the people who were like potentially doing worse off and were like getting put into like this little cage. I remember thinking at the time too, I remember I didn't even think like, hey, wow, that person's like really fucked up. I mean, the thought crossed my mind clearly, but I did remember thinking like, wow, the circumstances of that person's life must be like horrible.
I
Um,
see. Well, it's quite a
yeah,
like a self like that's quite a well, I mean, maybe not, but from my perspective, it's quite like a mature thought, right, at that age. Or, but maybe
yeah. I
that's
mean, but
because
if you
my
think about
experiences.
like what happened to me, I was
Right.
literally like in school 1 second, and then I'm arrested the next second, and then I'm in the mental ward the second after that. Like I've just gone through an
Right.
experience, and I've like
Got it.
left my house, and I mean, I don't know that everybody would come to the same conclusions, but like that's a pretty big trigger.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, it really got me thinking about that.
Second follow-up question. When the police officers came into the school or whatever and arrested you and they said like
They just
you
happened to
gotta
be there, mind you. They were
okay,
already
well,
there. Yeah.
got it. Oh, you got lucky.
Yeah, it was my day. It was my day.
Yeah, it was your day. What do you like looking back on it now? Like what could have they had said differently? Like what do you wish they would have said to you, or what
I
would you
actually don't
suggest
regret
for something?
anything that happened. I
Right.
think everything
Okay.
that happened should have happened exactly the way that it did. I think I needed that. So I
Okay.
actually see it as like a bit of providence, to be honest with you. Like where I think like I
Got it.
got lucky, like probably an instance of me getting lucky.
Oh, okay. But quick, I know in previous conversations, maybe it was a different story. I'm not sure, but I remember you saying something, and it impacted me. And so this is why I'm kind of thinking of it. I remember you saying like you wish that the police officers, to some degree, or someone would have said to you like, "Oh, what's happening to you like is not your fault or whatever." Like I remember you saying that to me, and that
That
had
would have
quite
been comforting.
impacted me.
Yeah. I think
Okay.
if the officers would have looked at me as less of a threat and more of it as a human being,
Okay.
that would have been helpful. I think it's their training, to be honest with you. I mean,
Got
I
it.
don't
Okay.
know because I'm not in law enforcement and I don't really have like
Right.
close friends. But
Yeah.
from what I've been able to see in the documentaries that I've seen, and definitely with the things we've seen recently,
Right.
which are kind of like not at the forefront as much right at the second, but have been on the forefront of the national consciousness.
Right.
Yeah, some training programs that law enforcement goes through train them to look at situations as like just threats, which
Right.
I will say I also understand because these people are on the front line and they're risking their lives out there. So I get that. But
Right. Right.
um but yeah, I mean, sometimes the right answer is not just to sometimes you can diffuse the situation.
Got it.
Um
With a little bit more empathy or something.
yeah, maybe the
Okay.
first step shouldn't be like, how do I neutralize this with like the forceful option?
Got it.
Um, but again,
Got it.
I think that in my particular circumstance, I'm actually kind of quite grateful for the things that
Right.
happen the way that they happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the last follow-up question, like, so you said you were very angry and all the pent-up anger. Um, but kind of elaborate a little bit more on it. Like, where was the source of the anger? Because you just felt like your circumstances weren't fair, or what was exactly kind of the source of the anger?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. Um, that is something that I'm not even sure that I'm like 100% done unpacking today.
Oh, okay.
But I think that to some degree, it's like frustration. Um, like the economic circumstances play a huge part into it.
Uh-huh.
My parents divorced and their like very strained relationship, to say the least.
Right.
Like cops were called and court cases were had and screaming matches and all types of trash talking. But anyway, um, yeah, there was like frustration, possibly anger at each one of my parents, my economic situation, myself for feeling inferior, for like living in this situation. And by the way, I think that's actually what set me off for real. Because it was a very
Okay.
small thing that happened that day, but I feel like it was just, I felt like I'm not gonna take it. I'm not gonna take this. Like
What had
I was like,
happened that day? Just out of
somebody
curiosity.
literally just cut me off in line and then refused to like acknowledge the fact that they had cut me off at line. And I was just
I see.
like, how are you gonna do this? And then then the worst part is kind of like the lunch lady or whatever was kind of like, yeah, fuck it, like, you know, let's go. I mean, they're trying to feed like 400 kids, whatever. I get it.
Right.
In retrospect, but at the time, I was like, you know, I have to deal with all this crap, and I'm also going to deal with this too. Like,
Right.
no, I'm not. This is where I draw the line. Like,
I see.
so yeah, and then it just happened to be my day because, you know, the officers were already there, and so that's
Right.
how that happened.
You got
Yeah,
lucky.
yeah, I got lucky. Yeah. So. I don't know, where does the anger come from? I don't know. It's probably like a seething, like a combination of everything that kind of like happened in my existence. Yeah. I don't know. That's the best answer I got.
No, that's good. And then Flash, I remember another instance or story from your childhood that you've told me in previous conversations that kind of stuck out. Tell the story of also kind of related to anger when you were at the locker, and I think you had kind of gotten into a fight or something because some kid was picking on your friend.
Yeah.
That's where,
So I was pretty much, I think like it's fairly standard definition of like bullied in middle school. And you know, I just like learned how to take the crap. Like, you know, I deal with so much. I was just dealing with so much shit in my personal life, and then like also like I'd go to school and just also get bullied. And I was like, I don't know shit. Like, fuck this person. But I remember like I had a friend of mine. He was like this nerdy, like what I felt to be a defenseless kid. And like we hung out together because like I don't know. I guess we had similar interests. And yeah, I remember like the kid was just giving me like shit or whatever, and I was just walking, just trying to like get to class, ignoring him, not giving him a reaction. And what does a bully do when you do this? They go and they look for another target. So he starts to direct his attention at my friend, and he like really got into it. Like I remember just thinking he was like screaming to this kid's ear, and I remember this kid jumped and literally like put his hands on his ears and like was all the way at the wall. I was like, please God save me and get me out of this situation. It was like what I felt in that moment. I just remember being so pissed that at that point, like I just completely blacked out. Like, and then I just like blacked back in, and like I had him in an arm lock, and then I had literally picked picked him up literally completely and just like ran him in the wall. I literally looked at him. I only flashed in a couple times, mind you. Like I'm completely like out of it, like straight up, like in a movie when it goes to black.
Right.
Like it only like you get a frame or two. That's what happened. And I remember holding up to the wall and I was like, don't fucking do that. Don't fucking do that. And I remember I dropped him, and then I turned around, and then I remember flashing back. I walked away, and I literally grabbed my bag off the floor, put it over my shoulder, looked around at the people in me. Everybody had stopped in the hallway, and they were looking at me like, what the fuck? And I was like, you know, just don't fuck with people. Is what I thought in my head. Like literally just don't fuck with people. And I was like, and I just walked away and went to class, like super calm, like calm as can be. Like, yeah.
Right. You just had like snapped and like just wasn't even conscious in that moment.
Yeah. And I was literally like, because I was okay with it. Like, I guess, I don't know, you know, I don't know if a neuroscientist would listen and be like, oh, you had like, because there's a certain chemical or whatever, like when you try to like protect another that like starts to like, and I don't know, for some reason, like I just felt like this is a poor defenseless like kid. And I just, I just remember feeling so pissed. The experience then later scared me because I was like, you know, if I have a situation like this, I could really like do something and not even be aware of it. Thankfully, it has never happened again. That situation in hindsight like scared me for a while. And I remember, you know what the funny part is? I get into class, in science class, and one of the kids' friends goes like, "Good shit, man, you stood up for yourself." And I was like, thanks, dude, I guess. Like, you know, whatever. I wish I didn't have to do it in the first place, is what I thought to myself, but I was just like, yeah, thanks, bro. Yeah. So that was an experience. Yeah.
So if we kind of continue, kind of, I guess, flashing forward, is there any other kind of like, let's say, instrumental moments that stick out to you, in terms of your childhood? That'd be the first part question, and the second part, to tackle where you want. The second part would be is like, was there maybe not a turning point, but let's say, what were also the moments in your life that maybe, I don't know, like let's say set you in a different trajectory, or I don't, like, if you kind of understand what I'm saying here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it was around the turn. Well, if we go back after my like little vacation that I took, and I come back to school, they appointed me with a counselor, and you know, I think we talked about it before, but in that instance, she told me to like essentially like close my eyes and just breathe in and like just inhale like all the good things for me, and then just exhale all the things that are bothering me. And I remember I did the exercise reluctantly because I was like, what is this going to achieve? I literally, whatever. She goes, just do it. And I'm like, okay, fine. And so I just did it. And I remember like opening my eyes after what felt like a minute, maybe like at 90 seconds. And I told her like, see, this doesn't work at all. And she's like, didn't it? And then I realized, oh shit, the lights are off. And then she flicks on the lights, and it had been like an hour or something crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. And I remember thinking at the time, like, man, the mind is like really powerful. So that was an experience. That was again when I was 9. And then again, I had that experience later on, probably like 10 or 11 in middle school. No, probably 11 to 12 actually. I think the turning point comes around like I switched schools in middle school around the age of 13, and then I just made friends instantaneously. Like, you know, like I made good friends. I don't know what it was about the school or whatever. Maybe it was like in a more, actually, to be honest, it was a more affluent area. And the kids were like nerdier, more like intellectually focused or whatever, and like, you know, they had like interests or whatever, and I just made friends with them like just right away. I don't know, it was just like a completely different context. And that just kind of like changed my perspective too. Like, you know, I'm able to like have friends. It's not such a big problem. I also moved, mind you, in this, like I moved away from my childhood area. And then moved to like a better place. And so yeah, that was actually the turning point. It was getting out of like the neighborhoods, switch the context, surprise, surprise. You know, different context with different people. And then yeah, by high school, like I was pursuing my interests. So they had like a little bit of budget. I was always interested in computers. Lo and behold, there's a computer science classes that I can take, and there's things that I can apply myself to. And I started to like go to competitions and win competitions, you know. Started to feel like better about myself, and you know, to those kinds of confidence building activities, you know.
So it was like slow little, I guess, small wins or small little things that kind of built and built. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the groundwork was definitely laid with like my experiences and perspective that I had gained, but yeah, the small wins started to add up. Again, I see myself as a very fortunate person.
I want to kind of hop, like, I guess, more to the future as well, but first, before that, so of all these experiences that you had kind of growing up, what would you say are the biggest / best things that you learned from the experiences that you've had, given your circumstances?
Well, really depends about like, are we talking about like the conclusions that I've made now, like today, looking in retrospect, or the conclusions that I made like in the intermediate phases?
Let's go today, right? Because I would presume that today you have, like, let's say, even a more solid reflection of it, right? So let's go with today.
I think attribution, well, I mean, just the power of context, for example, not to I think I've seen this phenomenon a lot. I think a lot of people judge others by what they have and what their social status is. And like, to me, it couldn't like matter less, to be honest with you. Like the type of person that you are inherently, like what, you know, what your circumstances, how you feel, things like that. Those are things that like matter to me. And I guess not to judge people, which I think is, you know, a big thing that we've talked about before. You do not know what, like, people's life circumstances. You do not know what their intentions are or what their perspective is. Presuming to know is arrogant, I think, in most cases, or ignorant. And for me, like I've said before, when I feel like I'm judging someone, I feel like I need to like take a step back and really like learn more, or maybe broaden my mind a little bit. Because most of the time, people that you disagree with, I mean, they have perfectly like rational reasons from their perspective to do what they do. They may not make sense to you presently, but most people, like, it's very rare that like someone will just like, there's like no explanation for what they're doing, like bizarre, like,
Right.
yeah. Which I feel like is the approach that I think good therapists have. Like, and again, why I'm really like fortunate to have encountered these people, like they don't judge your circumstances. They kind of like work with you and meet you where you are. Yeah.
It's like the acceptance, to some degree, it's just the acceptance of you no matter what kind of thing. It's just being accepted to some degree.
Yeah. I also
Being
feel
understood.
like if you really zoom out, and this is like something I've really learned like recently, but if you really zoom out and look at our lives from an anthropological perspective, we're living in like wildly unnatural environments that we didn't necessarily evolve for. And then we're subjected to like different pressures. We evolved to like live together in like a tribe and like, you know, like cook a fire and like hunt together and have community like built in and collaborate and stuff like that. And now we live like in a world where like super disconnected, like there's social like massive social stratification, like, you know, access to resources is incredibly disparate. We live in a highly complex world that you need like knowledge to navigate and you know, therefore access to acquire such knowledge. I think it's natural that like some people will have like sort of a reaction that may not be adaptive to their environment. So, yeah.
Okay.
And it's like a perfectly valid perspective given their like context and the situation. Yeah.
Got it. So I guess the biggest thing, like to summarize that, the biggest thing that you would learn is just never to really judge anyone and to kind of accept.
Well, I mean, if you really want to take it to the abstract,
Yeah,
and that's like at the people level, like there is no absolute truth. Everything is relative. Like, you know, like pick your assumptions.
What do you mean by that? Pick your assumptions.
Well, at a certain point, like if you try to, okay, so let's get into this. I think in every statement, inherently, there is an assumption just by the nature of statements. And at a certain point, if you start to investigate your own beliefs and you ask questions and questions and questions and questions, you get to bedrock, where essentially there's something that's not verifiable and you have to make an assumption. In math, we call them like axioms. Like if you relax an axiom, for example, you get like Euclidean geometry versus non-Euclidean geometry. It's relaxing an axiom. And axiom is a fancy way to say like what are the assumptions that you like, that you can draw these conclusions from. Life is like that. At the end of the day, like I respect everybody's like religions, everybody's perspectives, because it's just they're choosing to work under a certain set of assumptions, and like that's the end of the day, like the best that we can do. I don't I don't really like think that there is such a thing as an absolute truth anyway. Like that's what really like I've learned, like in the really like zoom all the way back out and look at everything. Okay. Yeah.
Quick question. Now that we're still zoomed out, we'll zoom back in. But now that we're still zoomed out, we're on the topic. I'm curious for you. Do you believe there's like a right or wrong? And I guess if you don't believe in absolute truth, you don't. But like, I guess where would you get your basis or foundation for like
I mean, you
ethics or
choose.
morality?
You have to choose what your basis is. At the end of the day, it does come down to choice. I think
Got it.
I prefer to choose my assumptions consciously.
I see.
Some people are handed their assumptions, and I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with that, but I've always liked to have the power of self-determination as much as possible in my life.
Got it.
I do operate under a set of like my values, I mean, that I have
Right.
chosen. You know, I like to be as honest as possible. For example, I hate lies, like hate it.
Okay.
Like, you know, I actually think that like everybody should be as honest as they can be, like all the time, like within, you know, bounds that aren't like, if there's a harmful truth, then maybe, I don't know,
Right.
maybe not disclose that if you can avoid it, but you know, don't lie to people and don't be a liar. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's fair.
Like that's one
That's fair.
thing. And you know, trying to help people if you can. I really like the Zen idea of not taking anything that is not given. I think it's it generalizes really well. And a lot of like scopes. The most obvious ones are like don't steal. But you know, it applies to a lot of different contexts in a really interesting way.
Don't take anything that isn't given.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Care to give another example? I get that in the context of like stealing and stuff, but I care to kind of apply that to another.
Like consent in general is a big one.
Got it. Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
And like various scopes. I mean, what you traditionally think of as consent, but also like, it's like, for example, like let's say I was in theory, right? Like I was a government and I'm like trying to sell off a piece of land. Like
Right.
if I just like encroached on like some people's land, I mean, that's not my land. Like it wasn't given to me. You know?
Got it. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, and try to stray from that as little as possible. Just because even if you think that you're going to get away with it, you never do, because even if nobody else knows, you know, and then you have to live with your own like conscience, if you have one, unless you're a psychopath, in which case, well. And I don't mean psychopath derogatively. I mean that like an actual category of people who have a different experience. But like, yeah, most of us have consciences. Okay. And you have to live with them. Like, so you know, just don't do it. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. So kind of like zooming back in to your story a little bit again. Let's go. I want to learn more or try to understand more your mind a bit. So like in talking to you, I think you're absolutely brilliant. And you're just like a walking encyclopedia. So I want to hear kind of maybe the experiences in your life that kind of, I guess, allowed you to develop your intellect the way that you have, or kind of what do you attribute towards that?
Well, I think a lot of it was the beliefs that I was instilled with. For some reason, as a young kid, people perceived me to be smart, and they always told me that I was smart. And those things tend to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, in my opinion. If you believe you are smart, you will act accordingly. So yeah, that, I mean, I was interested in I was an avid, for some reason, I'm able to read like well and fast. And, you know, I read a lot of books when I was young, partially for escapism, and then also partially because of curiosity. I started reading some very mature books, for example. Like I read a Stephen King novel when I was like must have been like first or second grade or something, and that was heavy. I was like, yeah, it was really heavy. But yeah, I don't know. I guess reading, which is a big thing. Got lucky in that sense that I liked to read, and that reading is generally a really good way to acquire knowledge. My father mentioned something that really stuck with me, because as a kid, you're very impressionable. He said in Spanish, and then I'll translate to English. He said, "Los conocimientos nunca están de más." And that means that knowledge, like there's no such thing as like excess knowledge, essentially. And that has proven to be like the most true thing that man has ever said ever. Yeah. Because there's always a piece of knowledge will always connect to some other piece of knowledge in a very unexpected way, at least for me. Like sometimes I connect like really weird stuff together and I'm like, oh wow, this like makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, I think my curiosity and like how much energy I had, like being like a hyperactive child, just needing to like get that out somewhere and like exercise my brain or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that confluence of factors just over life compounds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. And then if there's anything else, like is there anything else kind of, let's say, influential experiences in high school you want to touch on, or do you want to go to
Well, I mean, I think high
university?
school for everybody is a very influential time.
Right.
So many things. I mean, you know, like your parties and like meeting people, like sort of appropriating into the broader social tribe from like your, you know, just your nuclear family out to other people.
Right. So when you flipped schools or you kind of changed locations, then you started,
that
let's
was
say,
in middle school, yeah,
making more friends, right? And then
and then in high school that trend continued. Because then those people from middle school went to various high schools.
Right.
Yeah, then those friends, I met the people at their high schools, and then I actually started hanging a lot. I hung out a lot around people around different schools, so I also got to see more of like that context effect. Your context is incredibly important, like in what you like, what attitudes you have, and what you're into, and all that. So I used to hang out with kids from like various magnet schools. Eventually, like School for Advanced Studies. SAS, and I used to spend more time there sometimes than in my own high school, which funny enough, I figured out a way. I like sat down and I read like the school's policies on like homeschooling or whatever. Yeah, because it's just like, why not? Because actually,
that's the normal reaction. Let me just read the school's policy.
I'll tell you why actually. I'll tell you why. So by middle school, by 8th grade, I was kind of like convinced that school is essentially a fugazi. And I wanted to see like how far I could push. Like I tried to fail on purpose. I was like, how hard is it to fail?
Right.
Surprisingly hard, actually. Like if you literally just your body and you show up and like you can do tests or whatever, like you can manage to be a C student. And like, yeah, I struggled to try and get a D, and I didn't even manage to get an F. And I'm like trying to see like how hard is it to fail, because that would be the legitimacy of the rating system, right? And I saw like essentially it's not legitimate, at least not in my mind. And so I kind of like got into school, like school isn't really for learning, even though they say it is. So I went to high school like freshman and junior year with that mentality, and I kind of just learned on my own and like what I was interested in. Spent a lot of time programming, for example. I remember I was just under the average for School for Advanced Studies, which I was like, oh, this is like a school where like they literally like take learning seriously. Like, oh, I'm actually interested in that. And I missed the cutoff by like 0.01, literally 0.01. And a lot of my friends had like were going to the school. And I was like, I could absolutely like be in the school. So whatever, that kind of stayed with me. So in junior year, I spent like tons of time there, socialized, went to the parties. Like everybody knew me. Actually, I was like in a sense, like not everybody, but like a big part.
Hot shit.
The school is only 200 kids though per year.
Cool.
So it's actually really easy to know everybody. So in senior year, I was like, I'm gonna figure out a way that I can like do the whole high school college experience, same way that SAS does. And I sat down and I read the policies of the school district, and I found the little homeschool loophole, and I looked at how many credits that I had, because I was taking extra classes in high school just because like pursuing my interests. I took like an extra microeconomics course or whatever. I was the only kid in my school to take it. So when we took the AP exam, they literally put me in like essentially a closet, and they were like, all right, well, here you go. I was like,
that's funny.
okay, yeah, because the only person taking microeconomics was me. And so I noticed that I had only 2 credits to graduate high school. And I was like, oh, interesting. If you are homeschooled, you can still show up to school for 2 classes. Exactly what I need. Interesting. And you can also enroll for college classes and they'll pay for it. Interesting. So that's exactly what I did. I essentially created my own curriculum. And what I would do is I'd show up to high school like 1 day a week, or sorry, every other day or something like that, like half the days. And I'd show up for like the first 2 periods, and then I'd just leave. I would literally walk out the door. I'd show the security guard my schedule. I'd be like, I am actually homeschooled. And then I'd go to college. And I was doing college and high school via my own curriculum, just because I figured out this loophole. And then at the end of the year, I was able to re-enroll myself in high school and get a diploma straight up, no GED. So I got a college education, like paid for, and high school at the same time, and I got to like just be in school whenever I wanted. Kept doing robotics, kept doing other stuff. So that was interesting. And then then start the college years. But I don't know, that was influential, like being able to see kids from different like schools and different attitudes. And I mean, those schools also tended to be more affluent too. Even though they were merit based, they tended to be more affluent.
So what would you say, again, it's just the biggest differences in terms of like, the biggest differences that you would see between maybe the kids that grew up in affluence versus the kids who didn't, in terms of how they thought, in terms of all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it's the mindset. I think looking back, the kids who go to those schools are much more aware of the like social implications of school than the kids who are in the less affluent schools. They kind of get that, like, they go to a school, they get into a good school, they're probably gonna have a career on the other side of it. So they kind of like knew the game that they were playing. Versus I think the kids in the other schools weren't. They're just kind of like going to school, like, what is this? Like, fuck school. I don't even see the point, right?
Got it.
Yeah. That was a big difference.
And question for you, like, I guess, is that message not told, or is it like, I guess, like, let's say you would spend a lot of money or whatever, a big marketing campaign, like, I guess how would you say it in a way where the message is received? Like, how do you kind of instill that mindset?
I don't think this would ever get approved by a school ever, but you just gotta be honest with the kids, like, legit, about what school is about. Like,
I see. Like, look, you have to go through this kind of bullshit system, more or less, to get this ability, to get the credentials, to get enrolled XYZ into this.
Correct. Yeah, it was not obvious to me at all that was what we were doing in school. To me, school was always sold as learning, and I judged it like this. I judged it like, am I learning? Not really. So what's the point? Like, what is this garbage that I spend my time on, like, daily, when I could be like reading or learning, or like Mark Twain, I don't let my schooling get in the way of my education, or something like that.
Got it. Right.
That was my mentality.
And then that's just something that, because I know, like, as a kid, like, that's what my parents always taught me. Oh, like, you have to do this so that you can go to college and then get a job. And I guess that's like, from a parent's standpoint, I guess it's just a part of the system you had figured out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. With my mother would just drop me off at school, and it'd be like, I mean, go to school, partially like go to school so I can work. Go to school because if you get good marks in school, then you'll get into a good school, and then you'll go. Because my mother did not know that either. Got it. I mean, how is she supposed to instill this in me? So, later on, which is funny, later on when I drop out of college, she does say, like, oh, go get your degree, because like she understands, like, a degree like gets you a job. But then by that time, I kind of understood, like, a degree doesn't really like guarantee you a job either.
Right.
You know,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, my perspective on school, again, I just wish it didn't have the mixed messaging. I wish it did not present itself as something that is actually not. Because I think if you, at least in my opinion, if you look at like the curriculum and what it gets done in schools, it's not about learning. Like, I mean, maybe it's like a state-funded like daycare, you know,
Right.
or perhaps it's like a playground for kids to socialize. But like, is it about learning? I don't know.
Right. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I think there could be a lot better, but I would say like, I mean, from my experiences,
I
they're
mean,
not right, but at
obviously, yeah,
least,
you learn some things,
yeah, you
but
can write
I mean,
and,
hell,
you
it's
know,
a
math
school.
and right,
Yeah,
right,
you
right,
should learn some things, but are you like really learning? I don't know.
right,
And objectively, I mean, that's sort of the case. If you look at the country as
right.
compared to other countries and like learning outcomes and stuff like that, you know,
Always room for more improvement.
in the
A
US, yeah,
lot,
I mean,
a lot.
you're
Yeah.
from, yeah, you're, well, I don't know. Did you go to school in Canada?
Yeah, yeah, I went to school in Canada, and I would say, like, look, in my opinion and experiences, Canada's like pretty similar to the U.S. I don't think there's a whole lot of huge differences.
Yeah.
So I would say the experience in the U.S. is probably pretty similar to Canadian. They say like where you are in the stream. So like California is very similar to Vancouver, New York is very similar to Toronto, and then like the Midwest or like the middle of America is very similar to the middle of Canada, which is where I am, right? I'm in the middle. So like
Right.
growing up here would be comparable to growing up in like, I don't know, North Dakota or Iowa or something, you know? So
Interesting how geography really,
yeah,
again, back to the context point.
right,
Yeah, the differentiation between
right,
peoples and economic like activity and all of that. Again,
right.
context matters.
Quick question. Was there any other like differences? So like, okay, one would be like the importance on or importance or understanding of how the education system worked in terms of context of society. But was there any other kind of differences you noticed?
Well, they understood, they had like passions and interests. They were differentiated as individuals because I think that they maybe
Oh,
had
interesting.
more opportunities to explore what they liked and didn't like, and they were interesting as people. That's actually what drew me there, was like they were just interesting as people, whereas as the people at
I see.
like my high school were not really interesting as people.
Got it. Okay, interesting. That's a insightful. Just because the kids had just the opportunity essentially in the affluent schools.
That's what I
Okay.
attribute it to. I mean, I
Right.
guess you could say that potentially every single kid inherently had some like, but I don't know, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could definitely see the differences in the kids for sure. Like, yeah, like even like what music they listen to, how they dressed, obviously, but you know, what kind of interests they had, how well read they were. Yeah.
Question for you. What was like the opinion? Two-part question. What was the opinion of the kids in the non-affluent schools of the kids in the affluent schools, and then vice versa of the affluent schools of the non?
I'm not sure that these groups were mostly aware of each other.
I see.
Is the answer there, which I think
Okay.
probably holds pretty true for like the different like stratification of like society. I don't think, I mean,
Right.
you engage with people generally within your same
Your stratosphere, yeah.
yeah.
And so so let's say as people grow a little older and maybe not become 100% aware, but like interact with people with different like stratospheres without maybe understanding what would be like common perceptions, let's say, in your
I would
experiences.
ask to that question, I'd ask the question, do people interact outside of their social, like,
Well, I don't know if they interact, but it's like for example, like on the news, right? Or like, I'm not sure if they interact on like a person to person level. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Well, you do, right? But not on a daily basis, right? Let's say one time or two time encounters, let's say.
maybe not, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, I think in public life we're very isolated in the United States. We don't really have like a community, a center of community or anything
Right.
like that. Like previously the function of like organized religion, like where do you go to like now you live online, but like,
Right.
yeah, like how deep does that relationship kind of go, like with
Right.
people that online? Like, yeah, if you're very very affluent, like, or you're very very poor, I don't think that you really, I mean, first off, you're geographically isolated because neighborhoods and like
Right.
zoning and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Suburbs versus inner city. So first off, there's that. And then that in and of itself, like in your social networks, how many people are you going to know that like straddle both those worlds? Like,
Right.
I actually think the answer, and if I can opine on our social state in the United States, I think a lot of it is that we don't know each other. Like,
Right.
yeah, we don't
Well,
we don't
yeah.
interact with each other, and we don't maybe feel like we need each other either. I think it really helped if people tried to avoid snap judgments.
Mm.
I think asking why and trying to also be aware of your own emotions and your own bias. You need self-awareness to avoid like taking your immediate reaction as truth. Yeah.
Huh.
Um,
Interesting.
yeah. You may think, does this situation make like, oh, this situation makes me angry. Okay, why? Okay, is that affecting like my judgment of the situation? Am I afraid? You know, am I feeling indignant? Whatever emotions you may feel. Like, just coming back to like the Zen thing, it's like, yeah. Well, I mean, as Zen as a fundamental idea, you kind of have to like accept that everything that you perceive is like an illusion. Is essentially you're not perceiving anything like
Right.
perfectly. And it's like, I mean, even like your vision is just like your brain piecing together like, you know, this this signal that comes in through your eyes. You're not even
Right.
like, I'm not even seeing you. I'm seeing in my brain like my like
Right.
algorithm for putting together the like perturbations that hit my eyes. So like at a very fundamental level, I think you appreciate that like you're not even getting like objective data, and that, yeah, like your emotions will sort of
Mm.
uh maybe like not lead you to the right conclusions.
Right.
Yeah,
Like
so
even like what my vision of you, of what you look like, and what my vision of I look like could be 100% different than the vision that you look like to you and that I look like to me.
oh, I guarantee that it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I think if you look at something that's fundamental as like dysmorphia,
Mm.
it's like case in point. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with like,
Mm-mm.
yeah. So dysmorphia, like the most common form of, or I think like the most, I won't say popular because it's not a necessarily a positive thing, but like body dysmorphia, like somebody who many people will say,
Uh,
hey, this person is like a healthy weight, be like, oh my god, I'm so like fat, and that's a
right.
bad thing.
Right. Yeah.
Dysmorphia, like same person, different perception.
Right.
Um, you know, like this, everything is
Hmm.
like that. Yeah.
Okay. Um. Yeah, that makes sense. Um. Okay. So going back a little bit, talk to me a little bit more about why you kind of started pursuing the path of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I think I started to pursue the path of entrepreneurship. Originally, I start to pursue the path of entrepreneurship because I thought it was more interesting than the other routes that seemed to be available.
Mhm.
Um, then I stayed, I think, with entrepreneurship for I think the reason that a lot of entrepreneurs stay with entrepreneurship, which is that it doesn't seem like you really fit in any other place. Um, like entrepreneurship is all like, and I apologize if this is not how you'd like to be classified as an entrepreneur, but entrepreneurship is where the weirdos go. Like,
The non-cool people, like the
yeah.
non-societal cool people, like
Well,
the
I mean, you
nerds
might
that-
be cool, but you might be like a little, like there's something a little different
Yeah.
or whatever. You're just like, I'm not gonna do things the other way around. I think it makes
Well,
sense.
yeah, by nature you're kind of testing boundaries or creating, like you're
Yeah.
pushing the limits to some degree, right?
Right.
You're
Like
conventional.
finding the exceptions or
Yeah.
yeah, and it's the unconventional path. I mean, for now,
Right.
I hope it does become the conventional path. I think everybody should have like a business where they're like it
Right.
works for them. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so I feel like that's where I potentially like I got into it because maybe it was more interesting and maybe I thought it could afford me like some freedoms. Because again, self-determination is a really big thing for me personally. Always has been. Yeah, having like retaining a degree of autonomy. And yeah, I think I just stayed because I don't think I don't think life really makes sense otherwise, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And tell me about you and Lewis, that was your first gig, your first venture kind of thing when you and Lewis hooked up together?
Well, I dabbled in entrepreneurial things before that time. I mean, maybe by like a different idea, but like, like selling whatever, like, selling video games, like trading and stuff like that. Yeah. I did the whole like candy thing, like selling the school candy, and that was really interesting too. That like I could exchange something for money, and then they would be happy for that, and I get money. Yeah. What else? There's a couple of things here and there. My dad actually used to take me on with him when he would do like door-to-door sales. So that was a cool experience. Probably pretty useful. It probably just seeped into my subconscious. So my dad is actually a pretty entrepreneurial guy, I guess. Yeah, and that's probably like pretty good education I got just from like being there, like by osmosis. Yeah, and then I remember the first time I sold like software was to my economics professor. So that was interesting. Because I was in class, but then I was able to make money off, doing a project for him. And then I was like, what am I doing in class? But anyway, yeah, and then it kind of just developed. I went down some avenues that I learned from. Like for example, I think the ideas that at least I had about startups, like proper startups and things like that, I don't think lead to like in most cases lead to good outcomes for like the founders. So
the founders, yeah.
Yeah, so I've I've like changed the way I've redefined my relationship with entrepreneurship in recent times. Yeah.
The more of the Dane Maxwell start from zero model.
Empathize. Yeah.
Indie hackers, yeah.
Indie hacker, the bootstrapper, the like really like sell it, build it, learn, iterate, all that good stuff. Instead of try to create $1 billion company right out the gate, think that you're going to get venture capital money, get really complicated on the mechanism and not, it's just like a lot of mistakes that I see a lot of people making. A lot of entrepreneurs make those mistakes. A lot of people. Yeah.
What would you say would you say that's the biggest mistake, or what would you say the most common mistakes that you find other new entrepreneurs making?
I think the biggest red herring of like the quote unquote tech startup is that it's the tech that matters, that it's the mechanism that matters. It's really not. It's your customer problem. And their willingness to try and solve that problem. That's where you should start, stay, keep coming back to and work everything off of that. If you end up with an interesting mechanism based off of that, then yeah, it all opens up some possibilities for you. But I also think that the whole model of completely like creating an infinitely scalable business is like fraught with risk for various reasons. The most basic one is that if you're able to automate every part of your business, somebody else's as well. And that means that you've essentially commoditized your business. So the moment that there's a competitor that has better features than you do, you're going to lose those customers unless you have some type of like moat, like network effects or some other situation that's going to help you, like high switching costs for some reason, which that kind of barrier is like eliminated. It's like less and less every day because of the internet and the ubiquity of information and, you know, technology and options and all that good stuff. So yeah, I think that like maybe the lifestyle business is a dirty word in the venture capital game for obvious reasons. Or at least to me, they're obvious. So I'll explain what they are. I mean, as a venture capitalist, I don't think you can really make a lot of money in the traditional VC model on a lifestyle business. But it's very good for the founders, and it could lead you to opportunities that could potentially scale. With your knowledge, and just, you know, you can create a much healthier business and probably avoid some burnout and some massive risk in the other models. So I would caution anyone who's doing entrepreneurship, who's just getting started out, to just go and interview people about their problems in a certain way. Like, read this book called The Mom Test. It will save you time. You know, read Start from Zero from Dan Maxwell. Get a good mentor to help you close your first few sales, and just like start small and develop your entrepreneurial skills. Because I think a lot of the skills transfer from a simple business to a more complex business. But if you try to go for the complex business first and you don't have your fundamentals, you might struggle a lot.
I want to touch on a little bit on your car accident, and if you've any kind of reflections on that before we kind of head out here. I want to hear about that.
I think anytime you feel like you've almost died, it makes you it makes you really rethink like what living is. And it really made me think like, I just can't do like this business thing that I'm doing the same way. What am I doing with my life? Like, I could die at any moment, and that was very real to me, and it is very real to me. And yeah, that really prompted me to, like, you know, seek like spirituality in terms of meditation and all of that, and yoga and all that good stuff. But also to really rethink like what I want to do professionally and how I spend my time, like working versus living, and like, you know, my personal relationships, my relationship with my family, my relationship to myself, my emotions, working through like past traumas and stuff like that. Really just like more self-care. It really like revolutionized a lot of aspects of my life. Because I had that experience. Really made me take a step back and think like I should live more consciously.
Okay.
And
how do you define living consciously? I think I know, but for other people, like, what would you define as living consciously?
I think what you do every single day should be well considered. I don't think that you should make decisions because of the inertia that you have in your life. Like, hey, I've got this career, so I'm just gonna make these decisions because, like, this is the career that I have, or whatever. Right. Or you know, this is how I define myself, hence I'm gonna take this kind of decision. Like, you can always redefine yourself and always strike a different like life bargain. You know, you can work less, find ways to make more money. You can spend more time with your family. Like, I had read a Harvard study that they did. I think they asked people on their deathbed like what were their greatest regrets or something like that.
Right.
And I think there was only like a few top ones that emerged. One of them was not spending enough time with like loved ones, like working too much or whatever. Like what matters at the end, really, right? That not taking like risks not taken, like not even they don't care about the failures, they care about the risks they didn't take, the what ifs.
Right.
Second one.
Right.
God, and I think there was a third one, but now it's sort of escaping me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think those are the two like major ones. Not spending enough time with your loved ones, not taking risks. Um,
Yeah. Okay.
so I don't
Nice.
know. Take it from that. Like then it's a regret minimization framework. I think I have to be at
Right.
the point. I had the insight. It's like I should be at the point where if I die any given day, if I had the chance to think about whether or not I'd be happy about that, then I should be happy at that moment. Not thinking, oh well, I never got to achieve this thing far off in the future that I was like kind of like.
Got it. It's
I
like
should be
going after
happy in the
what you
day to day.
want. Right. Going after what
And
you
the
want right now.
now, being
Yeah.
the present, try not to trade the present for the future too much. I mean,
Got it.
make decisions that maybe over the long term would help you, but like enjoy the moment, enjoy the journey.
How do
Yeah.
you balance in your mind? So this is the thing I'm kind of been struggling with thinking with, right? Like I guess
Yeah.
if you believe the root of a lot of suffering is desire, right? And that would be trading your present moment for the future to some degree, right? Or that's what you're
Yeah.
going for. How do you kind of balance that, right? Because you want something in the future. Usually stuff, in my experiences, stuff that you want that's worth it takes a lot of sacrifice, right? So I guess where do you find that balance between staying in the present and then, I mean, trading your present moment and happiness for something that might have some future benefits, right?
Yeah, I think the way that I resolve that apparent conflict is like by combining. I just happen to be reading both these things at the same time.
Okay.
I was reading the Three Pillars of Zen, and I was reading Atomic Habits. And in Atomic Habits, there is a principle that the process is more important than the goals. And in Zen, there's a concept that the means become the ends, or the ways become, like means and ends become one thing. Like
I see.
essentially, you live your goals by doing the thing itself. It's like very like recursive and self-referential. And then in Atomic Habits, it's like just focus on the process, and the goals will take care
Right.
of themselves. So essentially, figure out how you live every single day such that your goals will take care of themselves and that you are
Okay.
achieving what you ultimately want.
Got it. Okay, cool. Cool. That's very
Yeah.
insightful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then jumping more reflections, but reflections from our previous conversation. What would you tell other people? And I know we touched on this a bit in Lewis's podcast, but like, what would you tell people who grew up in the same sort of circumstances, more or less, as you?
Yeah. All right. I got 15 minutes, but let me see. Ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. Try to step away from your context if you can. Ultimately, it's probably not your fault. There's nothing wrong with you on an individual level, although you may feel that way, and that's valid. Everything that you want is ultimately within your power to achieve. I think you have to grow into that belief over time. I mean, just the basic like affirmations, like you are enough, you can achieve what you want. You are a special human being. Like, just like know that and repeat it to yourself. And yeah, unfortunately, when you grow up in these kind of circumstances, you begin to attribute a lot of like negative things about yourself, like, oh, I can't achieve this or that. You have like self-limiting beliefs. But ultimately, I mean, again, that's product of your circumstances. It's actually not it's not inherently true. Like, all of us have the ability to achieve what we want. Yeah, which is actually kind of funny because I came to that conclusion before I ever got into Zen. But in Zen, there's like this concept that everybody has an essential Buddha nature within us,
Mm.
and that we are all able to achieve like our enlightenment or whatnot. And I think in some sense, I mean, we're all able to achieve anything we set our minds to. There's nothing inherently wrong with anybody.
Prior to when you got super into Zen and stuff, and when you were younger, what helped you get over your self-limiting beliefs?
Identification was a big part. Sometimes it manifests in insidious ways, like you don't know that you're sort of doubting yourself, or you might find like, oh, I just don't want to do that thing, and why? It's like, oh, I'm afraid of failure, or what is that going to mean about me, or like, oh, I don't know that I deserve this, or any other of the different versions that takes. And so identifying that and being aware of that and be like, oh, okay, and then just literally just deciding like, no, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna prove myself like, I can do it, and you just book that idea because you're literally operating against your beliefs. You have to kind of take action to change what you think about yourself. So you have to kind of contradict your own thinking, which is hard. It's a difficult thing.
And how would you suggest it's just the continual process of telling yourself that, or like what would be the steps to change these deep-seated beliefs that you have about yourself?
I mean, first off, first try to be aware. Try to identify in your own thought patterns, your own, like what you would say, like negative thoughts, negative self-talk, limiting beliefs and stuff like that. If you have to journal. I didn't particularly. I mean, I did journal a little bit actually throughout several times, but like most of mine is just like, okay, that thought, where's that coming from? Think about those thoughts. So think about your own thoughts. So there's a degree of Zen in everything, right? Like Zen is sort of, and meditation is sort of observing your thoughts and being detached from it. You have to do that to get past it. So that, then take action, because your action shapes your beliefs. If you do things and try it and you're successful, it'll start to change your beliefs. Then go back and think about why you believe things about yourself, aka therapy, whether you do it on your own or you do it through guided means. And yeah, just every day, just show up. Like you just show up and you try, and you will succeed over time, and it will change your opinion about yourself, and that will be a positive feedback loop in the positive direction.
Okay. Cool.
So that's how you do it.
Cool. And then 2 more questions, because I'm running out of juice on my earphones anyways. So before my earphones die, but 2 more questions. How do you define a successful life in your opinion?
I think that it varies wildly based off of your individual perception, and any way that you define success is like fine, as long as it's it comes from you and it truly gratifies you, and ideally it would not be harmful to others.
Got it. And then I agree with you. Now what's your definition? With all of that,
that's really
preference. Yeah.
That's a really good question. I think I don't want to rely on somebody else's definition, but I think this is a component that I think I identify with. So Steve Jobs said, like, if you have to get up in the mirror and you're like dreading what you do too many days, that's a bad sign. For example, I like to be genuinely engaged, enjoy what I'm doing day to day, feel like I'm challenging myself, feel like I'm succeeding, feel like I'm helping others. I like interpersonal interaction. Just like, and also I think the key is if you feel like you could do this every day of your life and still be happy, it's probably a good sign. If you feel like you're only doing this so you can get to some other state, probably not a good sign.
Interesting.
Because then you're literally trading the present for the future, so you're not being in the moment. So it's kind of like the Zen thing. Like your ways become your means become the ends. Ways and means become ends. Yeah. That's like
Okay.
sort of happiness for me in an abstract sense. And what is that? That's what happiness, success means to me. And the content of that can change, but that's success, my personal definition.
Got
Yeah.
it. Nice. And then last question. I know we touched on this a little bit with Lewis, but yeah, if you, let's say you have kids and you want to teach them 3 to 5 traits or
Yeah.
whatever, what are your 3 to 5 traits that you think would be,
Oof, saving the hard hitting questions for the last 5 minutes. All right. I think the first trait is to be open-minded. So yeah, not judging. Which I guess implies awareness and all this kind of stuff. So like, Zen type style stuff.
Got it.
The other is to like trust yourself. Like again, I try to instill in my child that like again they're inherently good and like worthy of things. And the other part is just to kind of like to show up, like I don't mean like you don't have to necessarily be working hard in air quotes, but if you show up enough and you stick with it, you'll end up doing the work. So just show up. Yeah.
Got it.
So like essentially don't judge, believe in yourself, and show up.
Nice. Awesome. I like it.
Pretty good values, I think.
Yeah, I like it. But thank you, Chris. Thanks for the conversation. Insightful as always, and I always enjoy our talks. So I really appreciate you sharing a bit of your story. And I think that you have a lot of experiences and valuable insights that are helpful to others. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a wonderful day. I'm gonna go run to the next thing.
Awesome. You too. Have a great day.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye, Chris. This was part 1 of the 2-part series. Part 1 is just more about Chris and his life. I'm releasing another episode where me and Chris pretty much just shoot the shit about entrepreneurship and lifestyle business and kind of the VC world. So if that interests you, make sure you listen to part 2 with Christian Echevarria, the Zen entrepreneur. If you want to find Chris on Twitter, his handle is @Chris, ChrisGereina. So make sure to give him a follow on Twitter. Always lots of value add tweets. Also, you can find his company on the internet. It's www.instantinbound.com. And again, nothing but great things to say about him and his work and what he does. So if you need to reach more customers, he is your guy. So be sure to check it out. Be sure to check out the website, www.humansoftheworld.co, and follow us on Instagram. That's @humansoftheworldpodcast. There, make sure you join our Telegram group chat and join some other cool people from around the world. So with nothing more, I hope you have a fantastic day.